battle in science at the moment. And it's not what you think. It's not between good science and bad science. I'll explain what it is in a moment. But what I want to talk about is if we're to do proper environmental sustainability, we have a choice between whether we want to do it using a scientific approach or whether we want to do it using an emotional approach. So we have two types of environmentalism. One is the market-driven environmentalism, and the other is the science-driven one. So here's the difference between them. The market main one is for generating revenue. It's used by NGOs like Greenpeace, and I'll show you how they use that in a moment. And it feeds basically on panic and worry, and it requires shutting down actual solutions. Anyway, you can see what's on the slide there. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. Just to show you, this is Greenpeace. Most of you think Greenpeace is an environmental organisation worried about the environment, but the reality is that Greenpeace is actually a campaigning business. It's a Dutch strictling. Its headquarters is in Holland. It makes an annual turnover of about $400 million a year. It's supposed to be a not-for-profit, which means it doesn't pay tax, but it doesn't mean that it can't increase its assets. Its current assets are about $250 million, of which actually 180 million is cash in current accounts. Next slide. The thing about Greenpeace, and applies to many of the other NGOs that are working as campaigners, as a campaigning business, is they always try to make sure that if their campaign is not making enough money, they'll ditch it and move on to another campaign. And so what you'll have is, for example, it might surprise you to know that they stopped getting as much revenue in from climate change in about 2013, and they've been dropping the percentage of money that they invest in climate change. That basically, most businesses, they spend about 10% of their finance on promoting the product that they're selling. And so if they're not making enough money, they will reduce the amount of money they're spending on it. So they always spend about 10% of the revenue. Now, the reason I know this is that way back years ago, in the 1970s, I actually worked as a tax inspector in Ottawa for the Canadian government, so they taught me how to analyse financial returns. So what I'm showing you here about Greenpeace is just taken from their own annual returns. This isn't my analysis, this is theirs, right? So what I noticed was in 2015, when I could see the end that their money was going down, I could see they needed another campaign, and they came up with this plastic campaign. It was very easy to know in advance what they were going to do, and then I predicted again that this year they would be coming out with the Extinction Rebellion campaign, and next year I predict they will be going back to the water and air pollution campaign that they ran way back about 10-15 years ago. So all of these campaigns come in cycles. The key thing about it is that they spend about 3 years investing money to build up the campaign. So therefore they've got to come up with a campaign that doesn't have a solution. Because if they come up with a campaign and then they've lost all the money. Now this happened with the plastic. They started off in about 2015 with the idea that microplastic in washing gels and perfume products were ending up in the Arctic. That was the campaign they put out. So the beauty manufacturers and everybody instantly said, right, let's replace that with diatomaceous earth, which they did, and that campaign kind of shut short. So they readjusted the campaign and so on. I'll just go through the whole thing a bit further. Go on, next slide. To show how much they go on about the skeptics spending money on promoting anti-climate things. Look at the total amount of money that Greenpeace, just Greenpeace, have spent on their climate campaigns. It's nearly $500 million over the last, since in the 1990s.
More.
That's about 10% of what they earned from it. Go on to the next one. Here's a comparison between this data that I got, the red line there, is what Greenpeace say ExxonMobil was spending on promoting climate skeptics. So this is their data, not mine. And there is what they actually have been spending on promoting the opposite side. Now, over the entire length that Exxon stopped doing anything. By the way, that estimate for what Exxon was spending on climate thing was, it wasn't real money. It was just, they analysed if Exxon donated to any group, say a conservative group or something like that, that they felt was against climate change. It didn't matter what the donation was for, they just said that was spent for climate change. So next slide. So myself and Ronan and Willie Soon and Patrick Moore, by the way, is one of the last of the 12 original founders of Greenpeace himself. He was, there's only 2 alive and he's one of them. He had to get out of Greenpeace. He was the only doctor, scientist in the original foundation of Greenpeace. And he was there on the Rainbow Warrior when they went protesting against the nuclear things. But the thing about it is that he had to get out of Greenpeace because, and he was at one time the president of Greenpeace in Canada, and he was on the governing board of Greenpeace, and he was so disillusioned with it. When they said that they were going to have a campaign to ban chlorine, and he said you can't ban chlorine, it's an actual element, that's not something you can do. So that's why he resigned. Go on to the next one. So what we are looking at, the big battle that's going on in science at the moment, is not, as I said, between good, bad and bad science, because we can take care of that. This is what's the problem. It's actually marketing. There is an awful lot of, if you have a product and you want to improve your brand name, if someone comes along and says A is good, B is bad, then you will going to align your product with A. You're going to say my product supports A because A is good and my product is good. And this unfortunately means 2 things. First of all, because you're now supporting A, you're spending your advertising on it, it reinforces the notion that A is good and that B is bad. And then more people are going to support the A thing, and you get a sort of bandwagon effect. But nobody, so it really doesn't matter whether A is good or bad or what the actual facts are. Market is driven by where the biggest return is going to go for, and that's the most popular thing. So if we go on, down, if you look at, say, Ben & Jerry's, for example, I'm not pro-gay or anti-gay or anything else like that, but I just wonder, what has ice cream got to do with your gender assignments? Nothing. But Ben & Jerry's have decided that that's popular at the moment, so they're promoting that. So here's a list of different things that are just being supported because they're popular. So if you go on to the next one, right, there's market-driven environmentalism. By the way, this whole marketing thing, last year it was called societal marketing, this year they've called it morality marketing. But if you take the amount of money that this whole thing generates, if you take the main marketing groups, there's about 5 or 6 marketing agencies that hold most of the world's marketing ones. One of the biggest ones is WPP. They have about 1/5 of, that would be the holding group. They would own a lot of different smaller groups around the world. But, sorry, I'm getting a bit tired here.
Move to that.
They're based.
Yeah, they happen to be based in Dublin, not that far from where I am.
So next,
Yeah. Okay, let's take one of the ones that you've all been subjected to for the last 2 years. The replacement for the climate change is this one based on the plastics, right? I could see this coming, and so here it is. Here's what you're actually being told. So if you go to the next slide, here's the sort of thing you're seeing. An awful lot of these some of these pictures that you see about plastic and turtles and that were actually filmed down in the aquarium in Kerry. At one stage we owned an aquarium in Dublin. We had the first, anyway, but the point about it is these are not necessarily, what you see there isn't necessarily what happens. Go on. Now, the big plastic scare you've been told about is that there's billions of tons of plastic being thrown into the ocean. It's forming these great big garbage pots in these various gyres. So, to test this out, the biggest density of plastic is found up in this north of the red dots there. And so a trawl was done through this most densely populated section, and it was it's the one with the biggest red dot, so it's the most dense amount of plastic found in this gyre. And it went for about a metre wide, trawl for a couple of miles, and when they took it out and analysed all the plastic in the densest one, what you see over on the far side is all the plastic that they got. Now, in actual fact, we've had to expand that by a large amount, but if you took all of that plastic from the most densely section for miles, it wouldn't be enough to fill a tin boat. The most dense amount of plastic in the ocean, the biggest gyre, if you were to collect the plastic from an area the size of Manhattan, it would just fill 2 small rubbish bins. So this is the big catastrophe that they're talking about. But the other thing is that they put down all the time is they say that this plastic is going to live forever in the oceans and will never end. The average lifespan of plastic in the ocean is about 4.5 years. It's been well studied. But they don't also point out to you is that natural plastic comes from oil. There's large amounts of oil naturally seeping out of the ground under the oceans all the time in huge quantities, far more than we could possibly dump in plastic, because we don't manufacture that much. But it never gets to the surface because it's eaten by bacteria. As it comes up, tries to swell itself up. So there are several, I know of about 300 types of bacteria that live on polyester. So in other words, just like potatoes make starch to serve as a food reserve, there are these bacteria that make polyesters that use as their food reserve. And so when they get hungry, they redigest the polyester they've manufactured. If they come across a free bit of plastic in the ocean, they eat it. That's basically it. So that's why it's part of the reason why the average lifespan in the oceans is only about 4.5 years. But there's lots more data and measurements that have been done. But that's not what you're told. You're told it's going to be there forever. Where is all the actual plastic that's in the ocean coming from? You might think, well, it turns out that less than 1% is coming from North America and 1% coming from Europe. The rest is coming from the Far East and Asia. But all the campaigns aren't put in the Far East and Asia because they're not going to donate money to Greenpeace and the various other things. Instead, it's all put where the money is. So if you were to get rid of all the plastic straws and all of the other plastic that the Americans generate, you wouldn't affect the plastic level by even 1%. But the key thing about where all the plastic's coming from, it turns out that it's just bad management of your rubbish. My son-in-law was over in Nepal there during the summer, and he saw these. He was standing at the side of the big river. I don't know what it's called, Yangtze or something like that. I don't know what it was. But he said these garbage trucks used to come up. They had a little platform, come up to the river and empty all the garbage into the river, and then it got washed downstream. Now obviously there's plastic in it, it's going to come out at the end. But there's another thing, you see these photographs of kids standing on a beach with all this plastic coming around. If you look carefully at the most popular one, what you find is that it was actually taken after the tsunami in Japan, and all of the waste on the beach returned from that. And that's what you see, and it gives the impression that this is a normal visit in a normal day on a stone-ridden plastic beach. It is a very, very Greenpeace's revenue from this plastic campaign nearly exceeded what they got from the climate campaigns. It's due to come to an end sometime around this year. The new Extinction Rebellion one, which is biodiversity. But the interesting thing is, if you want to know whether you're hearing actual science or whether it's marketing, I can give you a few clues. The first thing is, they have all these marketing slogans that go from campaign to campaign. So in the climate one, they had 97% of scientists say this. In the biodiversity campaign, they had 97% of tigers are extinct in the wild. In the pollution campaign, they had 97% of the rivers flowing into the Aegean Sea are polluted. They have other ones like 90 to 97%. So it's all of these things are advertising campaigns. The other popular one is it's urgent and catastrophic. So if you hear something that's urgent and catastrophic, that's an ad, that's a campaign. It wasn't urgent and catastrophic last year, and 3 years from now it won't be urgent and catastrophic again. So the problem is that science is not fighting bad science. It's fighting marketing, and marketing doesn't care about the facts. It really doesn't. So this is a big, next slide, Ronan.
Well, I'm just wondering if, in the terms of the time,
yeah.
I think
There's
you
no
have.
left, I'll be talking to myself.
Yeah.
Okay, just looking at the plastic straws and replacing them with paper straws, this is the effect that it has on the environment. What you can see there is the paper is much more environmentally impact than the actual polystyrene. But if you go to why do we go and use plastic in the first place, here you can see this is why. Right? Okay, so what I'm saying is nothing to do with facts, it's to do with marketing.
I'm just wondering if we've time for, I think maybe take questions.
Yes. Okay.
That's a great question.
Yes.
It's half a statement, half a question. So it was about 4 years ago, I was at Whole Foods getting out, and there were a couple of kids, 17, 8 years old, with this board in here trying to ask for donations. And they worked for, I forgot, Greenpeace or whatever. And they were talking about the plastics and climate change. I told them, hey, have you heard about this plastic-eating mushroom? You know, they actually eat this stuff up. You can do it in landfill in the absence of oxygen. Never heard about, didn't care. They don't care about solutions.
No.
They move to the next person because they want to fundraise. Can you tell me what, I was wondering, why doesn't the city of San Jose, where I live, or all the cities, why don't they use this fungi? Because they survive 100% on plastic.
They're not interested in a solution. Remember that this is driven by generating income. So the facts don't matter. It's whether it's popular. So if something is popular, it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. If people believe it, then that's where it's going to go, yeah.
Do you have any sense of the amount of plastics that was from Southeast Asia was actually what they purchased our recycling?
No, it isn't. In fact, though some of the plastic that went into the jars was by ships going over and suddenly becoming empty and coming back again. You know, so that was a contribution. And there have been cases of containers falling overboard as well.
But large part of
the large bit of it is in Asia, for example, a lot in Nepal and that. A popular thing is to get water. You get the water in these little plastic bags because it's a hygienic sort of thing. You know, yeah.
Michael, the large part of all these so-called microplastics came from mostly the fishing nets and all those things. Those are responsible for some of it, quite a lot of it.
Yeah. But again, over 40% of the plastic in the oceans is scrap buoys and fishing